We mocked my husband about who wears the pants in the relationship. His silent exit said everything. I still remember that night like it was yesterday. The night everything came crashing down. That party that should never have happened, and those truths that should never have been said. I remembered hosting the party, preparing everything that was needed. I was the planner. I had always planned for things ahead because I hated surprises or being caught off guard by something unnecessary. I was already regarded as the perfect host because of how well my parties usually turned out. That day, I had decided to do something out of the ordinary. My husband was against it, but I decided I was going to because I have always been headstrong, and most times I came across to people as the dominating type. I didn't always mind so long as it gave me what I wanted at that moment. I didn't know I was going to eventually ruin myself that way. Hello, Reddit. Let me introduce myself before I dive fully into the story. I am Emma, a 34-year-old woman. I worked as a banker, and you probably know how demanding it is to be a banker. I got married as early as age 22, and I have 2 kids, a girl and a boy, both 11 and 9 respectively. My husband, Ryan, was a stay-at-home husband. Well, not what you're thinking. He worked from home. He owned a remote company that dealt with building apps and those tech stuffs. I don't know much about them. So he was quite successful on his own. But he chose to stay at home because he knew how demanding my job was and sacrificed his own by creating a work-study room for himself where he could work when the kids weren't around. How we met was a really funny story. He had come invited to a party of a mutual friend of ours in which I was also present. The party was very loud and filled with drugs and alcohol and horny youths, and at the time I didn't exactly like situations where I had no control. So I had tried to leave the party only to be bumped into by this weird, sweaty guy. I knew he must have been drunk or high on something, or was probably dancing to the crazy hardcore music, so I just looked at him in disgust and made for the door. He had followed me and had insisted on apologizing for bumping into me, but I was only half listening because I had wanted to get out of there fast. He, probably observing my mood and impatience, told me there wasn't a cab I could board around because it was already midnight, and he offered to take me because he was also planning on leaving too. I was surprised because I had expected someone of his own physique and handsomeness would definitely catch the ladies' eyes, so would most definitely enjoy the party. I remember being so surprised by his decision to leave the party when it had barely begun that I asked him why, and he had grinned and told me he had just come there because he was invited and he had planned on dashing in and out of the party, and so had come in his sweatshirt and pants because he came from jogging exercise. We hit it off from there, and we exchanged contacts and kept in touch until he asked me to date him and eventually to marry him. And of course I said yes. We got married in a small local church that meant a lot to me because of how I was revered there, and because I was able to plan every detail of my wedding, even up to the tiniest thing as flowers. I baked my cake for my wedding, I designed my dress but gave it to a designer to help me with the sewing, and I handed out the wedding invites myself. I even handled Ryan's suit for the wedding, and it was perfect. If you're wondering why Ryan didn't do anything, it was because it's always easier to let me have my way and do my thing, because I hated to see any spot of unplanned imperfections. Never. Did I mention my parents never showed up for my wedding? Oh yeah, you heard right. My father had always been a very controlling and strict father. When I was younger, he told me what to wear, how to dress, what to eat, and when there was a little rebellion from my end, he would make sure I paid for it dearly. So it just became easier to obey him and not get on his bad side. Same thing with my mom, too. She was like a muted mouse on a leash. She didn't do anything except what she was told by my father. So there was never a surprise birthday party or a dinner that wasn't originally on the food timetable or a vacation that just suddenly was decided. Everything was always dictated by my father. I wasn't even allowed to call him Dad the way my friends did with their parents. My mom only addressed him as my husband. Never the sweet pet names I hear my friends tell me their parents called each other at home. I was never indulged as a kid, and I had sworn to myself, even as a child, that I would never be like my mother. So when I was old enough to leave the house without it being considered a rebellion by my father, that is going to college, which was even closer to home than I would have wished, I left and never returned, even on holidays. Everything about my life was planned towards not turning into my mother. I planned everything for myself. the kinds of friends I had, my reading timetable, my schedules, the kinds of food I ate, and everything else. I didn't have anything surprising happen because I hated it so much, so my friends knew and respected that, even though it was only after an incident that happened. It was my birthday, and as usual, I had planned what I wanted to do. Buy a cupcake, eat and sip my hot tea while lying in my bed, and read the newest collection of my books on history that I had just obtained. I had gotten to my dorm that night, and everything was dark in the room, which was surprising because we had no notice of light out. So I had reached for the switch, and then came the shout of surprise and happy birthday songs. I remember being so angry that I threw the cake to the floor and ordered everyone out of my space. I didn't bother with an apology even after then, so everyone minded their business from then on. In fact, on my birthday, I just wished a simple happy birthday, no cake, no gifts, and I was honestly fine with it. It was what I wanted. I didn't enjoy being surprised. When Ryan had even proposed, I was already aware he was going to because he had shown me the ring prior to the time, and I was even the one who chose the venue, invited our friends over, and did everything else. Oh yeah, back to why my parents didn't show up at my wedding. After graduating by then, I had already met Ryan, and we had started our relationship, so it was a mutual decision not to waste time dating for years before getting married. Mind you, it was more my decision than Ryan's, and he just agreed with it. So I went to visit my parents after years of not doing so, and told them I would be getting married. Well, as you must have guessed, my father opposed it, and as usual, my mother was mute. I could swear that the woman hardly said a word without getting approval from him. I was adamant and went ahead with it anyway, and they didn't show up. My father, because he couldn't agree to let me, another of his controlled tools, out of his hands, and my mother because my father was her God, his yes, his no, her no. I had planned to get pregnant almost immediately after marriage, the reason being that I wanted to give birth first before I started my career so they both wouldn't contradict. So luckily for me, I became pregnant 2 months after our wedding, and I was over the moon. Initially, before we got married, Ryan had bought a cottage that was pretty nice and well spaced, with 6 rooms, including 2 bathrooms, so it was a perfect fit to raise our kids. I wanted 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and Ryan didn't oppose it, saying whichever one came, he was fine with it. I got busy all through my pregnancy because I made the nursery into my perfect style, and I bought girls' clothes and toys, purposely believing strongly that I was carrying a female child in me. And when it was time to give birth, I gave birth to the beautiful baby girl, Alicia. She became my world, and I took very good care of her. If she sneezed, I was already at her side, checking her breathing and heart rate. If she cried, my heart ached, and I would do anything in my power to stop her crying. Ryan would tell me to take a breather and stop overreacting, but I wouldn't. I wanted to shower with so much attention, the attention I didn't receive from my own parents. I wanted her to have it all. I became pregnant again when Alicia was 1 year old, and though I didn't plan for it, it was the one surprise I was pleased to have. I did what I did when I was pregnant with Alicia, and hoped strongly for a boy, and yes, I gave birth to my beautiful baby boy, George. I started paying less attention to Alicia, and focused more on George because he was born a fragile baby as early as 7 months, and I was very scared to lose him. When George was 2 years old and Alicia 3, I decided I wanted to start up my career. I was fed up with sitting at home and having to wait for Ryan. I hated depending on him, even though he wouldn't complain. I guess at that point, I wanted some sort of validation that I was still in charge of my life and no one else had an upper hand. When I told Ryan of my decision, he was surprised but didn't oppose it. I mean, how could he have? I was strong-headed, remember? I got a job at a local bank at first. The workload was easy and a bit flexible, but because I wanted to reach the top as fast as I could, I worked harder than anyone else, becoming the last person to leave work and going back home later than usual when the children were already asleep, and leaving home very early, even before the children were up. So eventually, it became Ryan's duty to sacrifice his time and work hours to fit in the kids. I didn't mind. I spent less time with the kids because even on Saturdays and Sundays, when I was supposed to be at home, I was usually organizing small parties for my bosses and attending events with them. I was eventually promoted within a year of working there, which was a shock to everyone except me, because the normal promotion happened within 2-year intervals. In my 3rd year working at the bank, I was transferred out of town, and I was very excited. I started planning everything: the school the kids were going to attend, the house we were going to live in, how we would have to sell the cottage to get extra cash, and literally everything. I had gotten every detail planned in my head, and so I just told Ryan what his part was in the plan. Ryan got agitated and refused to uproot his life just like that for an unknown place. I became upset and accused him of not being considerate and not being happy I was making progress. So I stopped talking to him and committed to more late nights to trash any attempt of his to resolve our argument, because I knew the longer it took, the more uncomfortable he would become, and he would eventually agree with me. He eventually did and told me he was ready to move with me, but because of how demanding my new job would be, he'd have to work more from home to take care of the kids. I agreed. I wasn't about to sacrifice my career to be a stay-at-home mom. We moved as planned. Sorry, I meant as I had planned. I had booked the truck coming for our luggage a week before, and that was even during the period Ryan and I had issues regarding moving out of town. We sold our cottage at half price and took all our things except for paintings on the wall, which I didn't like so much. I had thought, new places, new paintings. Moving took 2 days, and we were safely in another town. This place wasn't the same. Not noisy and less crowded as our former place. It was rather noisy, and it seemed everybody was just moving so fast. For 2 weeks after we moved there, the noisiness kept the children and me awake, having restless nights until we eventually got used to it. Their nights were like normal day, because the same activities occur. The only difference was the dark clouds at night and clear ones in the day. Another issue we had when we moved was the hiked prices of everything. But I wasn't bothered really, and when Ryan brought it up, I got angry and snapped, saying I could as well take care of us with my new salary if spending money was his problem. He didn't say anything after that time, and eventually we settled in, got the kids in the school I had already chosen, paid for everything, and they started schooling. After then, everything else that happened was a blur. My work became more demanding that I began to spend the nights of my weekdays at hostels because of how late I was working, and I didn't want to disturb the kids, or Ryan having to wake up from sleep to open the door. The kids rarely saw me, and when they did, I was too tired and stressed to talk or play with them. My hard work paid off, and I was promoted more rapidly than usual, and it satisfied me greatly. I thought that was everything I needed and wanted. I couldn't ask for more. But yet I kept working, slaving myself so I could get one thing, the thing I didn't know. I know better now, though, only because I already lost it, and it was too late to take them back. My friends would tease me on how hard I took life, and how I didn't enjoy myself enough, and back then, I thought maybe that was what was missing. I had a perfect home, an understanding husband, 2 beautiful kids, and the most amazing job I could ever ask for. And still yet, I craved something. What I craved, I didn't understand what exactly it was. At first, I started to reduce my workload as advised by one of my close friends and delegate, so I could spend more time with my kids and Ryan. But I guess the years I had spent not giving attention to them had driven them further away from me without me even noticing. I couldn't even guess my kids' favorite food right. One morning, I had taken a leave and decided to cook for them, which, by the way, turned out to be a total disaster. Ryan was pleasantly surprised to see me cooking. I had made pancakes for the kids and a simpler meal for Ryan because I knew he didn't eat heavily, especially in the mornings. Excited for the kids to say thank you and be pleased, I was heavily disappointed when Alicia crunched her nose and told me she hated pancakes. Ryan also told me he now ate slightly larger portions of meals to keep up with the energy he spent in the gym. I didn't even know he started gym classes. George tried to eat, but that became one of the worst regrets in my life, as apparently George was allergic to milk, and I was the last one to hear of that. Thankfully, Ryan always had an EpiPen with him in case of situations like that, and it was all under control within an hour. Though he, Ryan, had to take him to the hospital to check if he was really okay and wouldn't have an aftershock. I was devastated. I had absolutely no control over the situation. I was helpless. I couldn't do anything as I watched my boy gasp for breath as a result of my own doing, and Alicia looked at me with eyes exactly like mine, but filled with contempt, and I was very unhappy. It was a very hard nut to chew, but stupid me. What did I do to handle the situation? I went back to work, because at least I had more control over that. I was the boss. My instructions weren't defied because that meant you were ready to be made redundant. It was my safe space, I guess, being in control. I started organizing parties for the rich so as to have them banking with us. And from what I said earlier, I was the perfect host, so the parties usually yielded positive results as we had more and more customers. I became unsatisfied with organizing those parties at home and used my savings to buy a beautiful mansion. I wanted my home to be the party hosting venue, and I wanted to be talked about as having it all. I didn't tell Ryan and only informed him after I'd already made the payment for the house and bought some things in it. When I eventually did tell Ryan, he just shrugged and asked that I inform the kids by myself. I did, expecting squeals and happiness because they now had a beautiful home to stay in, but they just nodded and excused themselves. I was angry, thinking that Ryan had turned the kids against me, but I still didn't care. All I wanted was the fame and the name, the woman in control, the boss lady. When we moved into the home I bought after some weeks, I wasted no time organizing the parties, what I do best, and they turned out amazing as usual. By then, every rich person in town, including celebrities, wanted an invite to my parties, so they started banking with us to be invited to the best hosts' parties. In a matter of 6 months, I had hosted 10 parties successfully in my new home, each one bigger and better than the last. My children made themselves scarcely available when it was time for those parties, including my husband, and I didn't mind because I didn't want to have to help watch what he said so he wouldn't give me a bad reputation. That was until one of the celebrities I refused to invite to my party because of his scandalous stories online started to slander me and say that I invited only the rich and mighty to my parties, except my own husband. I was very pissed and lashed out at Ryan, telling him he wanted to ruin me by not attending the parties his own wife hosted. And of course, Ryan, the peacemaker between us, started to attend my parties. Though I was the one responsible for his clothes for the parties, ensuring that nothing was missing from his hair down to his shoes. He would escort me to my parties, and of course, as I had told him, I wanted to play the perfect husband role. I didn't mind that after all the parties ended, we slept at opposite ends of the beds and Ryan wouldn't even look at me, let alone touch me. At that point, I was only trying to prove one thing, that I could do well without being controlled by a man. Everything was going my way, the way I planned for it to go, and it was all perfect. My dad died when I was 30 years of age, and of course, I didn't cry. I only attended his burial because of a sense of duty. I was the one who organized every detail of his burial, and of course, the people I had gotten acquainted with, some celebrities and politicians, showed up for that day, so I was already playing the perfect host again, not the daughter of a father who had just died. My mother just sat there staring blankly at the wall. She had been that way since I got the news of his death and came home. She wouldn't say anything or talk to anyone. I didn't exactly mind, as we rarely had anything to say to each other. All her life, she had said only what pleased my father, and done only what would make him grunt his approval. So I guess the thought of not having someone to tell you how to live or do things was scary. Ryan didn't come with me because he had an important deadline to deal with, so he only arrived a day before the burial. When he did, only then did my mother let out a sob and cry sadly into his chest, with Ryan's hands around her soothing her. I remember I had turned away then because I was hurt. How could she only sob when it was Ryan and not me? She hadn't even uttered a word to me since I arrived, and there she was, crying a bucket and whispering things only Ryan could hear. I had wondered then how they had even gotten that close when her own child, she had never called to ask how I was. I later shrugged it off and continued with the planning for his burial. He may not have been a good father, but I was thinking at that point that if I organized a beautiful ceremony for him, it would satisfy me that I wasn't anything like him. I had a heart. He didn't. I turned a deaf ear to my conscience pricking me at that point that I was turning exactly like him, as I had a husband that I didn't take care of, and children that most definitely hated me. After the whole ceremony, Ryan insisted my mom moved in with us. I refused and threatened him that he wasn't the owner of the house, and that I could as well throw him out if he stood on that decision. It was a mistake, believe me, I didn't exactly mean it. so please don't blame me." Ryan didn't say anything after that, but I know now that I already dug my own grave deeper with what I said back then. Everything was going the way I wanted, though, and I didn't feel the need to correct anything I might have done. I continued with my lifestyle and continued to suppress any twinge of guilt that occasionally ran through my mind. I was living my life the way I chose to, even if it involved a little unhappiness from another side. It all didn't matter, so long as I got what I wanted. That was what I told myself to comfort myself and to kill any form of guilt I had, until that very day. That very one day that wasn't planned by me, but was indeed planned by my unconscious lifestyle and stupidity. That very day I lost everything. I mean everything. Before I tell you about that, I might as well confess my other sin. I was cheating on my husband. It was one reason I had the biggest clientele. Please don't blame me. I had no choice back then. It started when I was working at the local bank. I was indeed hardworking and put in my best as I wanted to kick off my career so badly. But it was frustrating at that point to even please anyone, especially since my boss back then only wanted my effort, not in the office but in his hostel room. I got so frustrated and eventually gave in. I had decided then that it was just going to be a one-time thing, but sadly it wasn't, and that of course got its desired result, as I was promoted faster than usual, but I grew greedy. I wanted more. I wanted to be the dominating one, not only in my relationship, but also in every other aspect. I wanted it so desperately not to end up like my mother, and I guess that continued my series of affairs I had. I slept my way to the top. I even slept with some of my clients to get them in my hand. The first time I had done it, I felt so guilty and wanted to confess everything to Ryan. But what held me back was the fact that then I'd lose the dominance in our relationship, and that felt like death for me at that moment. So I withheld the truth and continued in my sin. So yes, back to that night where I lost everything. I had decided to host a party, but this time outside my beautiful home because of the whispers going about that I didn't host parties except inside my own home. I had informed Ryan the morning before the party that he would be going with me, and he had just looked at me weirdly and looked away without giving me an answer. Honestly, thinking back, I think I should have suspected that something was wrong because the look didn't sit well with me, but I just regrettably, now, had shrugged it off. As usual, I had his outfit prepared and everything else good and ready to go. Ryan went and said goodbye to the kids, and, well, I couldn't, as I was the hated one in the family, so I just waited for him. Ryan wasn't his usual self, even at the party, but I was too busy to notice. Busy doing what, you might ask? Well, busy laughing with my friends and mocking some celebrities that weren't invited to my party. Ryan had by this time excused himself from the table to go get a drink when a friend of mine mockingly imitated my husband. I was irritated by that, but I had laughed because she was one of the biggest clients of the bank I worked for, so I couldn't afford to upset her. That night at that silly party, we mocked my husband about me being in charge of the house. But then Ryan had come back to the table, but I didn't notice as I was still snickering and telling them funny stories about him. I should have noticed the table had gone silent. I should never have done that. But I did, and when I eventually noticed him, it was when he dropped the drink he had obtained on the table with a smack sound and turned to leave. I panicked then and ran after him, but he just shrugged me off and told me he wanted a divorce and that he was leaving with the kids. I couldn't believe my ears and still tried to convince him that we were just playing around. But for the first time in my life, my husband, the loving guy I have known all our marriage, let out a bitter laugh and said in a very loud voice what he found out about just yesterday from his cousin. His cousin had told him about my secrets that I thought were well safe. Apparently, I had even slept with the said cousin with evidence to show for. I was too shocked to deny anything, and Ryan just left. How I left that party, I wouldn't know. All I knew is that when I got home, Ryan wasn't home, and I raced to the kids' room. They weren't there either. There and then, I sat right in the middle of my big, beautiful home that now meant nothing to me and cried miserably. I had lost everything. I thought I was working hard not to become like my father, but I had already managed to turn into my father without knowing. The divorce papers came in faster than I expected, probably because his brother was a lawyer, and it clearly stated there that I had to give up rights on the kids. I cannot afford to lose them. I realized too late that everything I've worked for is nothing if I lost them. Life would be empty without them in it. And I realized that what I thought was work that could fill the emptiness inside me was the biggest lie I ever told myself. It's my kids and my husband, Ryan. Their love that could have filled that void. And now I've lost the right to even let them know how sorry I am. Please help me get back my kids and my husband. I'm desperately seeking help. I'll do anything at this point. I really need your help, please. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's me, Emma. It's been 2 months since the incident that ruined my life. Ryan refuses to hear my plea or allow me to see our kids. I feel awful and stupid about what I've done. I've managed to push away the one thing that should have mattered above every other thing away from me. I know I deserved all I got because it's obvious you guys even hate me from all the backlash I've received. But believe me, you don't hate me as much as I do. Did I mention I already quit my job? Oh yeah, I did. I couldn't bear to work in a place I thought was my best asset, only to lose what was important to me. My friends were obviously with me because I was tagged the perfect host, and so since there was no more party to my name, they dispersed one by one. I wasn't surprised when they did because it was not losing their friendship that hurt the most. It was losing my family. I pushed them off. Regrettably, now I cannot believe I eventually did become my father without realizing it, a controlling, stupid, cheating brat. I sold my mansion too, and bought back the previous house we lived in so I could maybe feel their presence. But it just made me feel their absence even more. It reminded me of what I could have had, and how I lost it due to my own foolishness. I had the best husband and the most beautiful kids in the world, but I decided to gamble with them, and I lost. I lost badly. A month ago, I had gone to see my mother and lashed out at her, blaming her for everything. But the poor woman just burst out crying and apologizing because she didn't know that was what she was doing to me, helping to rebel not to be like her. She then told me that after I left home, my father changed and became a better man until he died. I was surprised that my father could be what she described him to be, but then that left me with more regrets. I didn't give the man any opportunity to reconcile with me. I just saw him as a controlling person, and I grew up and lived with that notion. I guess as well as being a bad mother and wife, I'm also a bad daughter. Life was so much harder at this point. Ryan still refused to talk to me and refused any attempt at reconciliation I made. I was stuck living with my own shame and guilt and the what-ifs. Most times in my dark room with my curtains let down, I just stared into the darkness and imagined all I could have done better, how I could have been a better mother to my kids and a better wife to Ryan. I miss them. I miss them so much. I miss hearing their giggles and laughs when Ryan played with them. I never joined them, as most times I was too tired, actions I now regret badly. I miss hearing Alicia read and correct George's assignments. I miss the little moments I had with them. I regrettably miss the times I took for granted. I miss Ryan, his dimpled cheek which becomes obvious when he smiles, his boyish way of behaving sometimes. Most especially, I miss the look of love in his eyes when he told me he loved me. I regret taking everything I had for free for granted. I wish so badly that I had been a better person. I cannot begin to imagine a lifetime without them because presently, this moment is already torturous enough. I had everything on a platter of gold, and I threw it carelessly away. I'm stuck now in the vicious cycle I created for myself. Just how does one rectify what cannot be rectified? How do you rewrite the wrongs you've done? How do you unhurt people you hurt? How do you say sorry when your sin is way past it? I cannot believe just how I had everything and lost it in just a night. It's true what they say, that your sins end up catching up with you. Update. Hello again, Reddit. This is my last post here. I know most of you hate me because of what I did and how I hurt the people I care about. But still, thank you for reading my story. I really appreciate the hate and the little support I got. Everything's still the same. We're officially divorced now. I had no choice but to sign the papers. And before I did, I begged for one chance to see my kids, and it was the most bittersweet experience. Alicia and George came to the meeting spot we agreed on, but were so formal and rigid with me. I tried everything to get them to warm up to me, but I guess I already lost even that with them. At least I got to see them one more time, even though it didn't turn out how I planned. The last time I saw Ryan was when we were in court to get officially divorced. His eyes that were once filled with love for me were hard and unreadable. He refused any sort of help from my money for the kids, and I refused his settlement too. When we were done and he headed for the door, I had called out to him, and the way he turned and stared at me again with his unreadable eyes had me glued to a spot. I couldn't say anything. Words stuck in my throat and I felt bile rising. I was only able to mutter a "take care," but even that didn't get any response from him, and he turned and left. That has been the last I've heard from them. So let me end with this note. Don't ever be like me. Don't lose your family no matter what. With love from this bad mother/wife/daughter.
Hey Reddit, Randy here. At 52, I've seen a lot of life, the kind you'd expect from a guy who spent a good chunk of his years in the military. Now, I'm the guy who ensures things stay safe and sound, running my own private security firm. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. It's about Amber, my wife, and how our lives have taken a turn I never saw coming. Amber and I, we've been the kind of couple that folks in our small town of Boulder, Colorado, would look at and say, they've got it figured out. We met way back when I was fresh out of service, and she was this vibrant spirit, passionate about every little green thing that poked out of the earth. Her love for botany wasn't just a hobby, it was her life's work. She's got hands that have coaxed life out of the barren winter ground, and she's known for transforming the community garden into a slice of Eden. We've been side by side for 27 years, and not once did I imagine that our paths would be anything but parallel. We supported each other's dreams, her with her blossoming projects and me with my firm. We were the team that could handle anything thrown our way, or so I thought. I've always believed in the basics, loyalty, honesty, and the kind of trust you can only build over years of sticking it out through thick and thin. Amber, with her gentle smiles and her way of making everyone feel like they mattered, seemed to be right there with me. But life has a way of throwing you curveballs, and this one hit me right in the gut. It all started to change when she hit 50. There was a shift, like the kind you feel before a storm breaks. Suddenly, the woman who'd been my rock wanted something different. She wanted an open marriage, a concept so far out of left field for me that it might as well have been in another language. And I, trying to hold on to the image of us that I cherished, agreed to it. If I'm being honest, it felt like agreeing to slowly poison what we had, but I did it anyway, for her. The story I'm laying out here isn't your usual Reddit tale of woe and heartbreak. It's messy, it's raw, and it's real. It's about what happens when the person you built your world around decides they want to change the blueprints without you. It's not just about what Amber did, it's about how I handled it, with the kind of bluntness and cold strategy that my background taught me. So where were we? Right, the birthday bash. Amber's 50th. It was a shindig that would have made the social pages if we cared about that sort of thing. Our backyard was decked out like the botanical gardens themselves. Amber's doing, of course. She's got a knack for making things beautiful. Exotic plants that I can't pronounce the names of, fairy lights in the trees, and this fragrance in the air that was like stepping into another world. It was something else, let me tell you. All our friends were there, the grill was going, and Amber was floating through the crowd like some kind of earth goddess, all smiles and laughter. Hey everyone. Unfortunately, basically everyone who is watching these videos isn't subscribed. It would mean the world to me to quickly get out of the full screen video for 3 seconds and press that subscribe button. It's free, and you can unsubscribe anytime. Sorry for bothering, and thank you so much if you subscribed. I watched her, proud as any man could be of his wife, thinking we were celebrating another milestone we'd reached together. Little did I know, we were on the edge of a cliff I didn't even see. After the guests had left and the quiet of the night settled in, Amber sat me down on the porch. The air was still warm, and the only light was from the dying embers of the barbecue, and those fairy lights now seeming more like a stage set for what was about to unfold. "Randy," she said, and I could tell this was going to be one of those conversations that changes everything. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about what I want in my life, what makes me happy." I remember nodding, still clueless, thinking maybe she wanted to travel or start a new project. But then she dropped the bomb. I want us to have an open marriage. I swear the world stopped spinning for a second. Open marriage? My brain couldn't wrap around it. This was Amber, my Amber, talking about seeing other people. Like dating? Like sleeping around? I felt like I'd been punched. This wasn't us. This was some Hollywood drama nonsense. Not Randy and Amber from Boulder. I didn't get it. Was I not enough? Did I do something wrong? Questions were firing off in my head like a machine gun. But I just sat there, looking at her, trying to find the woman I thought I knew in her eyes. She talked about freedom, exploration, about being honest with each other and ourselves. She had it all thought out, said it would be good for us, that it was modern. Modern? I'm a simple man. I believe in one person for life, the vows we took seriously. This was out of my league. But here's the kicker. I said yes. I don't know if it was the shock, the fear of losing her, or some messed up sense of love that made me do it. I agreed to this open marriage thing. Inside I was screaming, but I kept it all in. That's what I do. I keep things secure, even if it's my own breaking heart. Amber, bless her, has never been one for gadgets. Give her a pot of soil and a seed and she's happy. But after that night on the porch, she got herself a new smartphone. Not just any phone, the latest, shiniest one that makes mine look like something out of the dark ages. At first, I thought it was sweet. Good for her, I told myself, embracing the new tech. She was all thumbs at the start, but man, did she get the hang of it fast. Suddenly, she's talking greenhouse climate control systems, moisture sensors, and rare orchids that need just the right amount of everything to bloom. She was in deep, always chatting away in these forums and groups. Or so I thought. Then came the night that changed the game. I'd woken up midnight or something, thirsty for a glass of water. I shuffled into the kitchen, and that's when I heard her, soft as a whisper, but clear as day. "I miss you," she breathed into the phone, and it wasn't about missing the sunlight or the rain. There was a tenderness there, the kind that used to be for me. My heart, folks, it didn't just sink, it plummeted. I stood there, in the dark, the glass of water forgotten in my hand, feeling like someone had just told me the world was flat. This wasn't about climate control or plant species. This was something else, something personal. Now I've been trained to handle all kinds of threats, to stay cool when the pressure's on, but this was a different kind of adversary. It was betrayal, and it was living in my house, sleeping in my bed. I didn't confront her, not then. I needed to know more, to understand what was happening before I blew it all up. So I did what any guy with a background in security would do. I started paying attention. I became a ghost in my own life, watching, listening, picking up on every little detail that I'd been too blind to see before. It was time to gather intel, to figure out who was encroaching on my territory. And that, Reddit, is how I went from being a husband to a sleuth in my own marriage. It's not a role I ever wanted, but there I was, piecing together a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to see completed. But I'm a man who believes in facing the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. So I braced myself, ready to dig deeper. Hey, Reddit, back again. It's Randy. So, after hearing Amber on the phone that night, things got weird at home. It was like we were both pretending everything was fine, but it wasn't. Then one day, I'm alone at the house and decide to poke around in Amber's greenhouse. It's usually her place, but something was pulling me in. I'm looking around, just killing time, when I see this desk she's got in there. One of the drawers is a bit open. I'm not a nosy guy, but something about that drawer seemed off. I walk over, tell myself I'll just close it and leave it alone. Yeah, that didn't happen. I pull open the drawer and there's a bunch of letters. These aren't like bills or junk mail. They're personal and they're all fancy with words and stuff. They're talking about missing someone and feeling things, and there's a lot of talk about plants, but it's not really about plants, if you know what I mean. I read these letters and my heart is sinking. They're to Amber, but they're not from me. Someone's writing to my wife about being together, and it's all hidden behind words about gardening. It's like they're using code, but it's pretty clear what's going on. I felt punched in the gut. Angry? Sure, but mostly just really hurt. I thought about yelling at her when she got home, asking her about these letters, making a big scene, but that's not how I do things. I'm the guy who's calm and gets the job done, not the guy who loses his cool. So I put the letters back, act like I saw nothing, and start thinking, what's my next move? I've got to figure this out, but I've got to be smart about it. This whole thing is a mess, and I'm right in the middle of it. After finding those letters, I couldn't just sit around. I had to figure out what was going on. I put on my thinking cap and went over every word in those letters, trying to make sense of all the fancy plant talk. Now, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I know how to put two and two together. The letters kept talking about the arborist like he was some kind of hero in a movie. I guess for Amber, he was. This guy wasn't just talking about trees and plants. No, he was saying stuff that you don't say to someone's wife. Not unless you're up to no good. I decided to dig a little deeper. Who was this arborist? Was it just a nickname? Or was this guy really into trees? I went through Amber's stuff, the gardening books, the receipts for all her plant stuff, looking for any clue that could tell me more. It hit me late one night when I was going through her computer. She had a bunch of emails about some big-shot guest speaker coming to town to talk about trees. The arborist, the email called him. That was my guy. He was coming here to Boulder, and something told me it wasn't just for the trees. I started to lay out a plan. I had to meet this guy, see what he was all about. But I wasn't going to just walk up and ask him. No, I had to be clever, had to catch him when he didn't see it coming. I had to know what Amber saw in him, what he was saying to her, what made her think all this sneaking around was worth it. And I'll tell you, Reddit, I wasn't going to let this guy just walk into my life and mess things up without putting up a fight. Okay, Reddit, Randy checking in again. Now, let's get to the big show. Amber's been buzzing about this rare orchid for weeks. It's some fancy plant that's hard to find and even harder to grow. She's in charge of showing it off at the botanical gardens, and everybody who's anybody in Boulder's green scene is going to be there. I've got my plan ready. It's the day of the orchid thing, and I'm feeling like I'm about to step into a boxing ring. My guts are twisted, but my mind is clear. This is it, the day I face off with the arborist and find out what's really been going on. I show up at the gardens, and it's packed. People are everywhere, cameras are flashing, and there's this big curtain around the main event. The orchid. Amber's floating around, all smiles, doing her host thing. I see her, but I'm not here for her, not yet. I'm looking for him. Then I see this guy, standing off to the side, looking all important. He's got that I'm a big deal vibe. That's gotta be him. The arborist. I keep my cool and move through the crowd, acting like I'm just there to see the plant. Amber starts her speech, talking about the orchid, how rare it is, how it's a symbol of beauty and resilience. I'm standing there, listening, waiting for my moment. Then she says his name, invites him up to talk about the plant. As he walks up, our eyes meet. Does he know who I am? I can't tell. He starts talking, and I'm just watching, waiting. Then it's time. I wait for a pause in the chatter, a moment when the next word hangs in the air like a jump ball. And I take my shot. Nice speech, I say, loud enough for heads to turn. But I'm curious. What does our guest think about loyalty? About honesty? Seems to me those are pretty rare these days too. The crowd goes quiet. You could hear a leaf drop. Amber's face goes white, and the arborist. He's looking at me like he's trying to figure out if I'm just some crazy guy or if the jig is up. I don't give him time to think. You see, folks, this man here has been sharing more than just his love for plants with my wife. And I think it's only fair that we talk about that, don't you? It's all out now. All the pain, the anger, the betrayal. It's out there for everyone to see. Amber's looking at me, then at him, and I can see the panic in her eyes. The crowd is whispering, murmuring, the buzz growing louder. There I am, in the middle of this packed event, with all eyes on me, Amber, and the arborist. I'm holding one of those letters I found, the one with all the flowery words that weren't about flowers at all. The room's dead silent now, and I start reading. Your essence is the roots that ground me, I read out loud. People are looking around, confused, like they think it's part of the show. Our connection grows, unfettered by the confines of traditional gardens. Amber's face is a picture you don't forget. She's staring at me. All that calm and control she's got is just crumbling away. The crowd's getting the picture now, the whispers are getting louder, and I keep going. Together we are wild, natural, untamed, I say, my voice getting louder. You are the rarest bloom in my personal garden. No one's in doubt now about what's going on. This isn't about plants. It's about my wife and this guy. The guy, the arborist, he's just standing there, not saying a word. Amber's looking like she wants the earth to swallow her up, and I can't blame her. This is her world, and it's all coming undone right here, right now. I look at her, really look at her. This what you wanted, Amber? This what open looks like? I'm not yelling, but every word hits hard. I don't wait for her to answer. I don't need to. I loved you, I say, and it's like the whole room takes a breath. But I guess I was just another plant in your garden, huh? One you got tired of watering. I fold the letter, tuck it back in my pocket, and give the arborist a nod. Take care of her, man. She's all yours. And I walk out. Just like that. I don't look back. I can feel the stares, hear the whispers, but I don't care. I've said my piece, dropped the mic, it's over. Walking out of those gardens, I feel like a weight's been lifted. It's not a happy feeling, not by a long shot, but it's something. Maybe relief, maybe just the first step in moving on. I get in my truck, start the engine, and drive. I don't know where I'm going, but it doesn't matter. I'm leaving that garden behind, and whatever comes next, well, it's gotta be better than what I'm leaving behind. I didn't stick around for the gossip. I went straight to a buddy's place, someone I knew I could trust. I needed time to think, away from the stares and the whispers. But I wasn't about to hide. I had things to do, moves to make. First things first, I called a lawyer. No more games. No more waiting to see what Amber might do next. I told the lawyer straight up, the marriage was over and I wanted out. The papers were drawn up fast, I signed them, and they were delivered to Amber. I didn't see her face when she got them, but I can imagine. Then I took care of the finances. Joint accounts got split, credit cards got canceled. Anything that tied us together, I cut it. It was like taking down a building, piece by piece. You don't want it to fall all at once, you take it apart so you can clear the site and build something new. I won't lie, it hurt. It felt like I was tearing out parts of my life. But it had to be done. I had to protect myself, my business, my future. I wasn't going to let Amber's choices take me down. The house was next. I loved that place, but it was full of memories of us, and I needed a clean start. I called a realtor, told them to sell it. I'd find somewhere new, somewhere without ghosts in every room. And my pride, well, that took a hit. But I'm a soldier at heart. I lick my wounds, I get back up. I started hitting the gym harder, picked up a few new contracts for the business, kept myself busy. I'm rebuilding, step by step. It's not just about getting back to where I was, it's about going further, getting stronger. Trust, though, that's a tougher one. I don't know when I'll be ready to trust someone like that again. But I'm working on it. I've got friends, people who've been there for me through all this mess. They're helping me keep the faith that not everyone's out there to backstab you. So there you have it, Reddit. The story of how my marriage ended and how I started over. It's been a hell of a thing and I'm not through it yet, but I'm moving forward, one step at a time, and that's all any of us can do, right? Thanks for listening, it's actually helped, getting it all out like this. Here's to new beginnings, no matter how tough they are to come by. It would mean the world to me if you could subscribe to the channel. Thanks and have a great rest of your day or night.